This is episode 97 with Jared Angaza.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Bryan Teare.
Creating and reacting are spelled with the same letters. What is up, everyone? This is your host, as always, Bryan Teare, and welcome back to another episode 97 of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast. And those were my words on the interview I did recently with Jared Angaza. Just a reminder that last week, episode 96, I shared part 1 of that interview, which you can check out at bryanteare.com/096. But today I'm sharing the second half of our interview, simply because it's packed with so much goodness. Now, Jared and I chatted about a lot in part 1, but in this part of the interview, you're going to learn why it's not just about positive thinking, why we need to take advantages of the opportunities that emerge, what Jared believes is one of the biggest challenges we face today, the 2 components we need to pursue our purpose, the real trick behind the law of attraction, and this is not some woo-woo stuff here, guys, how we give up our ability to choose our own thoughts, and so much more, including my definition of consciousness, my personal life ethos, and what I want people to remember about me one day. Now, if you missed episode 1, Jared is a brand architect and philanthropist who spent 20 years creating strategies, brands, events, and teachings that help us transform our perspective and reimagine what's possible. He's worked with governments, individuals, brands, and numerous nonprofit organizations around the world, helping them, come up with their brand strategy and all that good stuff. So he's a student of creativity in economics and science and strategy, philanthropy, and so much more, and believes that we're all extraordinary beings created to thrive through deep relationships, nature, and spirituality. Now that is a lot. I'll let you guys absorb all of this in the episode. And just a reminder again, head on over to bryanteare.com/097 to catch everything we mentioned in the show. That's all for now, guys, but let's go hang out with Jared.
Absolutely. Incidentally, a great book on this discussion is Wishes Fulfilled by Wayne Dyer, and it's one of my favorites. And it talks a lot about the law of attraction. He and Esther Hicks are close. I'm also a big Esther Hicks fan, or Abraham Hicks. And to me, I had my experiences with that, my kind of own journey with the law of attraction and that discussion, and which oddly started with a secret, which I watched like in Uganda somewhere like 10 years ago. And then there was not much discussion or even thought about that for many years later, until I was studying actually the Tao Te Ching. And then it led me into Wayne Dyer stuff, which led me into Wishes Fulfilled and Esther Hicks and so on. So my journey in that was very much attached to the idea of positive thinking. I grew up with like Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and all that stuff in the house. And I had to make this transition from positive thinking in that I will get that account, I will get that client, I will get that, to attaching myself, to using my imagination rather, to understand what the emotional impact of that would be like in my life. Like what we were talking about with the rain dance. Like, what would it feel like to have the mud between my toes? What would it feel like to have this experience of being financially secure, or to have that client that I want, or whatever it is. And I had to make this shift in my perspective to understanding that it's not just positive thinking in the way I had thought about before, but it's these positive emotions and using my imagination to get there. That ultimately the takeaway from that was the importance of imagination, and we're kind of raised in a culture, especially in the United States, that says look, if you want to be imaginative, that's great, but you're going to have a rocky journey. If you want to be like academic, then we can work with that, and there's varying philosophies on that in the United States. I realize we have a big entrepreneurial wave and all that, but at the same time, that kind of the status quo is still kind of geared towards that system that says academia outweighs imagination in terms of value. But even the guys that we learn about in academia, like Einstein, he said imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited to all that we know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand. That's huge, man. I mean, it's the imagination that makes the difference. So we, as a society, you can make a case we should be fostering societal systems that promote and bolster imagination, because that's where we get it's where we get a society of people following their passion and also being able to actually experience, not just follow it.
Yeah, you kind of struck a chord with me, and I've got a big a big thing with the whole education system and like the traditional model of how things are done, and my girlfriend's actually just started homeschooling her son, which I think is so cool. But the funny thing is, you mentioned Einstein, and these guys that we look up to as like pioneers and world changers, like your Steve Jobs and your Richard Bransons, they didn't do the way that they didn't like grow up or do the things that we are told are the way to success, which it blows my mind. Like, we admire these people, but then we're not kind of following the blueprint that they laid out. Which ironically was
they were punished, for their blueprint. Like during the time, we look back and it's easy to say, oh, they did this great thing. But now we look during the time, if you follow, some of their stories, society beat the hell out of them along the way, because they didn't fit into the system. They bucked the system.
And maybe I was wrong now. I just said like we're not following the blueprint that they created. I would even go as far as to say we shouldn't be. We should be following our own blueprints, which we can only tap into once we get clear on like what it is we want to create. Because the truth is, like, they didn't follow a blueprint, whether that was the conventional route or not. They did what felt right to them, and they took chances. And I just wanted to come back on two things from the seminar as well. And it's two kind of common mistakes that people make. The first one was we mentioned positive thinking, and like I said, the seminar wasn't about just positive thinking. And what Robin Banks said is that it's not just our thoughts, it's our thoughts, our words, and our actions. And the common mistake that people make is they'll say, like, he shared a funny example of a woman who came to him like 3 weeks after his course and said, like, Robin, I'm doing all the exercises and I'm thinking positively, and I'm doing my affirmations, but I still haven't found like my dream man. And that was what she wanted to create, like her dream relationship. And so he asked her like what she'd been doing, and she told him, and she'd done all her exercises and like followed everything. And then she said, like, he said to her, like, where have you been going out? And she's like, oh no, I don't go out. And I won't tell the whole story because it might take a while. But basically, like, what he was saying is you can't just do the positive thinking and like repeat the affirmations and stuff and then not take action. And I mentioned those opportunities that are going to pop up that aren't coincidental. It's cool that those pop up, but if you're not going to take action on them, then you're just kind of, you're indirectly saying to the universe that that's not what you want. Like if I had said, I want to work with young, inspiring, up-and-coming entrepreneurs, and then I get an opportunity to work with some young, inspiring, up-and-coming entrepreneurs, and I say, oh no, sorry, I don't want to do that. Like, what signal is that going to send out? One of scarcity and lack. That's what signal. And then the other thing is just a small thing, but it might be useful for people listening, is he said that when you're doing these like visualizations and affirmations, you want to be careful of the words and the language that you use. So it's not like, I want to be making $5,000 per month. It's, you say it as if it's already happening. So in that example, you'd say like, I make $5,000 per month. And actually for him, that was very similar. He was driving around in like an old VW Beetle. I don't know if you have those in the States.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he was driving around in like an old beat up VW Beetle, making 5,000 Rand a month, which is like probably $400. And he would tell himself, like, I make, I'm tremendously successful. I'm tremendously successful. I'm tremendously successful. And I think it was like 1 or 3 months later, he'd quadrupled his salary. But he said it was very difficult for him to be saying these things when he was driving around in like this old beat up car, making pretty much not enough money to pay for anything. But still telling himself again and again, like, I'm tremendously successful. I'm tremendously successful. But I think the most important thing that I wanted to touch on here is that it doesn't matter what you're saying and what you're thinking. If you're not actually doing when those opportunities pop up, then you're just wasting all those opportunities.
Absolutely. And I think there's timing that happens, along the way, and there's contrast that happens, all that, there's opportunities that come up. And if we don't have the kind of faith, I guess is the best way to say it, to step out into that and say, okay, this is an opportunity that came to me. I have to have the faith that it came to me for a reason, because I'm putting that out into the universe, asking for it. I've attracted it. Now it's here. But then you have to have the faith to like say, okay, I'm going to take the leap. I'm going to jump into, and it's that gap, mind the gap, right? It's in that middle space there that scares us and says, if I take this leap over the gap over there to this thing that I'm kind of imagining, I think really the question is, do I have faith in what I'm imagining? Or is that just a pipe dream? Is that just something that I'm imagining? And I think it's really, you could make an argument for the faith in that, amongst other things, faith in general, I think is one of the biggest challenges for the human race, to have faith, because you can't prove what may or may not happen. You can hypothesize and whatever, but without that proof, and let's face it, we're in a society that often says we must have proof before we step forward. So it's that faith and imagination. Maybe that's the key there, in figuring. In kind of going down that journey of exploring our purpose, but then walking into the purpose is another thing. Like making that our reality, that purposeful life is yet another journey.
And it's unsexy, right? Like, it's not what people want to hear. Like, people just want to think positively and have the thing happen to them. They don't want to have to take the risk. But I think whatever we're doing, there's a degree of faith. Like, if you're working a 9 to 5, and I want to be very clear, I have nothing against a 9 to 5. If that's what someone really wants to be doing, if someone feels like called to be a doctor or a lawyer, then I'm all for it. I just don't like when people think that that's the only route or the default path. But like, if you're working in a 9 to 5, you have faith that you're not going to get laid off tomorrow. So it's almost like whatever we're doing, there's a degree of faith. There was something else that popped up that I wanted to touch on. It's almost like the positive thinking and like law of attraction. It's not so much that it brings you the thing you want, it brings you the opportunity to get the thing you want.
Yes.
But then it's up to you to be like, this is what I wanted, now I'm going to take it.
That's just I'm glad you pointed out, because that's a small little dynamic that I think that little nuance there is what derails a lot of people. They get right up to the edge and then turn around, because they think, well, I asked for this thing, it should just happen. That's the law of attraction, right? And I'm like, well, kind of, but really what it is it's going to present the opportunity. And then you have to be willing to go through even whatever contrast may come through walking into that possibility, because it's not like the contrast just goes away. And when I say contrast, I mean, whatever level of difficulty or whatever. And so people get thrown off by that.
There's that cool cartoon of like, the mine worker kind of digging a tunnel underground and like getting fed up and turning around. And actually the gold is like right there, but you just can't see it. And that was
that's where most people live, is in that spot.
Yeah. And that's certainly like if I had to pinpoint like a theme of this journey that I've walked so far, is I just told myself, I'm just not going to give up. Like I'm just not going to quit. And for me, that was like, I'm not going to go back to my old job. and that might look different for different people. But that was like my recurring theme: is I'm just not going to stop. And so again, it comes back to the grit I think I mentioned earlier of like, how bad do you really want this, and what are you sort of willing to go through to make it happen?
Yeah. Well, in that regard, because you're describing some of your ethos there, like your philosophy of life, and I'm not going to give up. I'm going to find, go down this journey of discovering and walking out my purpose. And some of the other dreams and ideas and the things that you've imagined. And how would you describe, if you were just to take your kind of philosophy or ethos and pack it into a paragraph, how would you describe that?
Man, I should really have been better prepared for this question.
It's a big one, I guess. To some degree, you could also repackage this question to say, what is it that drives you?
Yeah. I don't know if I would have a crystal clear, super clear cut paragraph or two of my ethos, but there's a few things that I kind of live by and that inspire me. The one is to always be asking questions, whether that's of the way you're doing things, of the people you're spending time with, of what people are saying is reality. I think there's a power in, and it's kind of cool that I have a podcast and am a coach, because both of those things inherently involve asking questions.
Yes.
But I think there's a power in never accepting things as black and white, and always asking more. And then I don't really know how to describe this next one, other than like, it sounds so cheesy and cliched, but being all you can be. Like, to me, it's such a shame to see people just kind of going with the motions and, waiting for their day to be done almost. And there's that really cool saying, like, hell is getting to the end of your life and meeting the person you could have become, or you were destined to become. When I first heard that, a mentor of mine said it in a TED talk that I was, so I volunteered for my local TEDx organizing committee, and just so happened that a mentor of mine was speaking that year, and I got to be his backstage assistant. And he said that in his talk, and it was the first time I'd heard it. He certainly didn't make it up, but when he said it, I was like, man, that, like, if you are going through the motions and you hear that hits you, that cuts you deep. So that's a big one, like not leaving anything in the tank, I guess. And
yeah,
if you have an opportunity to make a difference in the world and to impact people's lives and to help other people, why would you not do that? And so that's one that I'm like, from the Stoics, who I've become a big fan of, is trying to focus only on what's in my control and nothing else. I think that's the source of a lot of misery and frustration, is when we try and control things beyond our control. And that was another theme from the seminar as well, that a lot of the religions and philosophies will teach. I think, yeah, that's a big one. Let me think if there's anything else. There probably is, but those are the ones that come to mind right now.
Cool. Well, I mean, those are big ones, and I'm with you on those. And even what you're talking about there in the end is a lot of the kind of the Taoist belief as well. It's like, and it's funny, like the American Indians, there's just a bit of humor actually in some of their ways and beliefs, where if you went to the medicine man or the chief and had this discussion about your stress, about something that you that's out of your control, that's in that box that you're discussing, that like, this is not in your control. What's in your control is how you react to that, how you respond to that. Mm-hmm. And there's always be kind of a look, kind of as an example from the medicine man that says, why on earth are you stressed about that? That's not in your control. It's just kind of like we don't even think that way. That's it's something that I've had to, especially in the, in my 20 years of activism and being a philanthropist and working in humanitarian issues with human rights and so on, and seeing those abuses, to kind of step away from some of those things and say, this is not in my control, but this is. And if I take control of, not can take control, but if I focus on this, perhaps I can make, a difference in that arena. But there's a box of things that are not in my control. And if I'm stressed about that, all I am is stressed rather than being a positive force. Mm-hmm. And that obviously you can reapply to all kinds of other areas of your life. And a lot of, what we've talked about here and in kind of coming to a close, consciousness is a big, broad term, that people use, and they all have their certain perspective of what consciousness is, what it means, and so on. My feeling is that, to some degree, it implies that we're becoming fully alive or awake to something. For you, what is consciousness? What does that mean to you? What is it like? What are you waking up to when you talk about consciousness?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. The first is, and this just came to me as you were saying, it is like, I've always said I'm not a religious person, but I do consider myself, certainly recently, a spiritual person. And I think what that is just knowing that we are not in control, that there's a bigger force or a bigger power that's in charge here. And I think, to me, like, spirituality and probably consciousness to some extent is like just the acknowledgement that that bigger force is there, and it wants us to win. Like, it wants our dreams to come true. And then the other thing is, like, I think to an extent my definition of consciousness, certainly after the seminar, is just like the quality of your thoughts. And to tie into what we mentioned about, like, what is in your control and what's not in your control, if you're always reacting to things in the outer world, so there's two worlds, like the inner world, the outer world. If you're always reacting to things in the outer world, your mind is going to be filled with thoughts that come up when those things happen. So, for example, like, if someone cuts you off in traffic, you could be like, oh, what a douchebag. Like, how could he do that? And like, or someone like bumps into your car, and like, all these thoughts start rushing in. And I'm not some like guru or superhuman. Like, it happens to me too. But if you're always reacting to things that happen in the outer world, your mind space is going to become filled with those reactionary thoughts. And you drown out the space for you, for your own thoughts to fill that space. So you lose your power to choose and create your own reality by planting your own thoughts in your mind. These sort of positive thoughts and visualizations that we mentioned earlier. And what I love is that the word creating and reacting are spelled with the same letters. Let me just quickly, I'm right. It is. I nearly made a fool of myself. And I think
that's great. I'll use that, by the way.
I think there's power in that. Like, if you're always reacting to things, you're drowning out your power to create your own reality, because suddenly the positive thoughts that you could be filling your mind with are replaced with these, like, this person's an idiot and that person's an idiot. And I think one final thing on here, and I'm really nerding out a lot about this seminar, but it's probably because it was very recent and ignited a lot of things that I've been quietly passionate about. And there were two languages, and I'm probably going to get these horribly wrong, but the first was like the language of victimhood, which was accuse, blame, and complain. And then, the language of a victim. And then the language of a victor was like your attitude, your belief, and your what was the C? It wasn't courage. Anyway, I knew I'd get it wrong, but
no worries.
So it's just like taking a more empowered stance. And yes, people can cut you off in traffic, to use that example. But you know what? Like, it's probably not even going to cost you a minute or 5 minutes of your entire trip. And by the time you go to bed, you probably won't even remember it. So why even give it thought? Like, one day you're going to laugh at how small your problems really were. So why not start laughing right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was on a podcast recently, the Art of Authenticity with Laura Coe, who's become a good friend as well. And she asked me, what does living authentic life mean to you? And it was one of those moments where I wish I had come up with some great answer or whatever at the time, but then I kind of did, miraculously, in that I thought, well, I think patience is what helps me to connect with my most authentic self, because it touches on what you just said there. If I am patient enough to tap the brakes before I react like an idiot or a jerk to this person that cut me off, but if I patiently tap the brakes and respond intentionally with the way that I want to respond, like how would Wayne Dyer respond, or how would the Dalai Lama respond, something like that. Like, how would someone that I view as being very patient and wise, a sage, how would they respond? And that can happen, as you know, in like a second. You can have that kind of, I can tap the brakes, I stop my initial reaction, and in this couple of seconds, I connect with my highest self, and I think about, what is the positive response to this? How could I be a positive energy or force or whatever in this? And that little second of a transition can make all the difference in your life.
Yeah, it's like there's the micro patience, which is that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the macro patience is what we spoke about earlier, like having this vision for what we want to create, and then just letting go and trusting that'll come back. And I spoke about it as grit, of like, I'm just not going to quit. But I think you could replace that with patience.
Yeah.
How long are you willing to wait to get what it is that you have said you really want?
And in that regard, patience and faith walk hand in hand together as well.
Totally. So maybe this is my ethos.
Perfect. That's great. Well, hey, and kind of in closing it up here, and I think we could probably go on for another hour, but we won't. What is the, if you could craft kind of the impact that you want to have on people's lives in terms of your influence, in I'll frame this a little bit, because, well, for instance, I'm a parent. I have 4 kiddos, and we also homeschool, by the way.
Nice.
And I am, as part of our commitment to influencing their perspective, and I realize that as a parent, I don't want to be the governor. I don't want to be the dictator in their life. I don't want to be the guy that says this is the way you got to do it, and so on and so on. I do recognize that regardless of my intention, I am one of the biggest influences in their life, right? So I call myself the chief influencer in my kids' lives, not my wife and I both equally. We are the chief influencers. That's what parenting is to me. Our kids are going to emulate our behavior to some degree, consciously or subconsciously or whatever. They're going to see, how does daddy react to the guy that just cut him off? So you being in the position that you're in, and I could say the same of myself, having a podcast and having, hosting discussions and spaces for this kind of discussion, you're influencing people, right? And you know how it is, on a macro level, and then on a micro level, even just your friends and family and whatever, you have influence through your being. What do you hope that looks like, and what do you hope that impact is to the people that are around you that you are influencing?
Yeah, it's cool because my girlfriend, as I mentioned, as we're recording this, they're about to move in, and her son is 8. So it's almost like I've become a dad now. And like my
Congrats.
Dad, and my dad always said, like, do what I say and not what I do, because that's what kids do. Kids do what their parents do and not what they say they must do. Which has been really refreshing, because it's forced me to be really self-aware and that kind of thing. And like, being true to these things that the way I want to live, and not just the way I say I want to live. I think the impact I would like to have is just at this stage of my life, anyway, is just to encourage and inspire people that it is possible to create your own reality. And there isn't like one set path that you have to take that other people are telling you need to take. Like if you feel called to do something else, it's totally fine, and it's totally possible to do that. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but I think what I feel called to kind of spread and share is possibility, and I won't say non-conformity, but just doing things in a way that feels true to you. and not feeling like you need to fit in or do things a certain way.
Excellent. Well, I've enjoyed this, man. It's been a great conversation. How can people follow what you're doing and connect with you, and what do you have going on right now that you want to share with us?
Yeah, so I've actually prepared an ebook which I just touched on self-awareness now, and I think self-awareness is huge in a lot of the topics we spoke about today. Because ultimately, like, you can't really know what it is you want to create until you know who you really are as a person. And so I've got an ebook that's called Do You Know You? And there's actually 6. I say 5 on the cover, but I throw in a bonus one. Spoiler alert. So there's 6 exercises there to kind of brainstorm some self-awareness questions and get a bit clearer on who you are and, you know, why you're here and what it is that you want. And people can get that completely free. I've created a page just for your listeners, and that's at bryanteare.com/ how do I actually pronounce the name of your show? Is it Inipi?
Inipi. Yeah. It's
so
bryanteare.com. Yeah.
bryanteare.com/Inipi. So INIPI. And you can just get that PDF for free. And then I'd love to hear from you if you really enjoyed this episode. You can shoot me a tweet at Bryan Teare. That's BryanTeare. I'm pretty much at Bryan Teare everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm lucky enough that my name is not super weird, but also not super common. So I've got my name all over the place. And then, even like if people want to shoot me an email, they can connect with me at brian@bryanteare.com. I always love hearing from people that listen to my show or shows that I've been on. So please let me know what you thought. And if there's anything that you're kind of struggling with and want to ask me about, I'm always happy to connect with people.
Excellent. Well, hey, Bryan, thanks so much for holding a space for love and freedom in this conversation with us today. It was excellent having you on the show.
Jared, I've really, really enjoyed this. And thank you for everyone taking, an hour and a bit out of your day to listen. I think the fact that you are listening to the show says a lot about who you are as a person and the life that you're looking to create. So keep going, have the patience and the grit. And I've no doubt that everything you want is on the way. So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up part 2 of the interview with Jared Angaza and this number 97 of the Quarter Life Comeback podcast. If you like this one, please share it around with your friends on social media and shoot me a tweet at Bryan Teare to let me know your biggest takeaways. For me, it was the fact that positive thinking is not the be-all and the end-all. Rather, we need to know what it is we want, and then when those opportunities come around, thank you, universe, we need to have the courage to act on them. Otherwise, we're sending a message that we're not really interested. So I hope you enjoyed this one. As I said, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at bryanteare.com/097. And make sure you subscribe at quarterlifecomeback.com to get all these episodes and more as soon as they go live. Thanks once again for joining me this week. I appreciate you more than you know. And until next week, guys, keep creating your quarter life comeback.